I'll kick off. Okay, ready to start. Good afternoon and a very warm welcome to the Decarbonisation Net Zero webinar. Got a lot of attendees today from a lot of different places around the world, so good to see our reach is improving, and thanks everyone for joining. So just to introduce myself first of all, for those who don't know me, I'm Jonathan Howell. I'm a business energy advisor at Coventry City Council, and I'll be chairing today's session. Now, a bit of context in terms of us and what we do. The Decarbonisation Net Zero programme helps businesses in the West Midlands and Warwickshire reduce their energy use and also help secure grant funding for that. But we also like to provide information and discussions in areas within sustainability and energy efficiency. For example, some of our past sessions have included solar PV and energy auditing, but today's discussion will focus on carbon accounting, which is something I'm being asked for more and more, asked about more and more when I'm out in the field carrying out energy audits. People sort of say, look, how do I start? What's it about? And how can we start on our journey? So just to sort of set that in a bit more context, I'm giving today's webinar the unofficial title of "You Can't Manage What You Can't Measure." Bit of a cliche, but I think it's key in terms of today's session. So you can't manage what you can't measure, basically. So just bear that in mind throughout today's session. So today's session will cover a couple of key points: where to start and what the benefits of measuring carbon are. We've got some really nice case study examples of companies that have done it and done it well in terms of their carbon accounting journey. And then finally, I'll give you a bit of an overview of us in a bit more detail and what the grant we have access to can cover and how to get us involved, to get us on site to help your business. So today we have two industry experts speaking, so I hope that you find all of our information of use. But before we start, as you'd expect, I've got a little bit of housekeeping to go through. So if you can just jump to the housekeeping slide. So first of all, if you wouldn't mind, could you all please turn your videos off and most importantly mute yourselves? We do get a bit of background noise on these sessions sometimes, but if you could, that'd be great. Now, regarding questions, we want to make it as open as we can. So for questions, put them in the chat as usual on these sessions, or even raise your hand when I prompt you to ask your questions. Webinar is going to be recorded, and we will send out the recording to you and all the slides post-event, and we'll also send out a little feedback form as well. So just let us know how we did and how we can improve moving forward, basically. Okay, next slide, please, Maria. Okay, so yeah, just kick off at 12:30, as you can see, and I'll just quickly whip through all the bits and bobs you need to in advance. Then we're going to go to our first speaker in a couple of minutes, and then we'll have a question and answer after our first speaker. Moving on to our second speaker, 1 o'clock, 1:05, again with a Q&A afterwards, and then I'll tidy things up at the end with a bit of an explanation of our grant funding and how you can get support from ourselves. And we're aiming to finish by 1:30 to make it nice and bookended for you. I always say this: if we are having a wonderful time and we've got lots of questions and engagement, I might overrun it a bit, see how we go, but we'll try and finish at 1:30 as best we can. Okay, so next slide, please, Maria. Okay, so I would like to introduce you to our first guest speaker today, David Wilshin from Auditel. Over to you, please, David.
Thanks very much, Jonathan, and hi everybody. Good to see so many people on the call. So I'm going to spend the next 20 minutes just talking about carbon accounting. We operate as a assistant, if you like, or a consultant in the SME space to get people started off on their journey for carbon. So let's get into it. Okay, so just to be clear what we're talking about when we talk about carbon accounting, these are the 17 UN sustainability goals, and when we talk about carbon accounting, we're being kind of laser focused on number 13, which is climate action, and that's where all the work comes through on carbon accounting. So the other one's obviously very important, but just to be clear, we're just talking about number 13 today. That's climate action. Next, please. Next, please. Okay, so many of you may be familiar with this, but just in case you're not, when we're talking about greenhouse gas emissions and carbon, there are actually 6 other greenhouse gases that are polluting the atmosphere, and they are all accounted for in carbon accounting. The reason we'll talk about carbon is it's the lowest common denominator. So if you look at this slide here, the next one on the scale is methane, or cow burping, but generally associated with livestock farming. And per ton, that is 28 times more damaging to the atmosphere than carbon. And as you go down the scale, right at the far end, the fluorocarbons associated with any ventilation you may have within your business, so your air conditioning, those gases, if they escape, can be thousands of times more damaging than carbon. And when we approach carbon accounting, we look at all these 7 gases within your business where appropriate. They won't all be appropriate for everyone. And then we distill them down to a CO2 equivalent figure, as it's the lowest common denominator. Next, please. Okay, so just a little bit of terminology and just what it means, because even today, phrases like carbon neutral, net zero, carbon net zero, they're kind of used interchangeably, but there is actually a significant difference from an accounting perspective. So carbon neutral is kind of a short-term objective that we can achieve here and now. So it is possible to measure your greenhouse gas emissions, and then you can offset them by buying things like carbon credits. And that's fine. As a definition of carbon neutral, you're kind of doing an accounting balancing act, but it isn't really what carbon accounting, carbon reduction is about. That is more about the net zero strategy, the longer term strategy for your business. So this is actively, once you've measured your greenhouse gas emissions, it's actively reducing these emissions in your business and removing CO2. You can't achieve a net zero objective strategy with offsetting. You can't buy carbon credits to do that. So it's an important distinction between the two. Next, please. And just a bit of clarity again on types of carbon accounting. So today, this session is about operational carbon. It's managing and measuring the greenhouse gases within your business operations. We also, as an accountancy firm, look at embodied carbon. Now, embodied carbon is more about if you manufacture a product, it's looking at the raw material extraction of that product, the transport into your business and the manufacturing process, and taking it further still into the lifetime use of that product. So we're not talking about embodied today, we're talking about operational, but you'll see that phrase come up as well. And when we look at the operational carbon element, we have 3 scopes of emissions we need to consider. So this is quite a well-used image, and you may well have seen it before, but it's the greenhouse gas protocol that is internationally recognized as the best way to approach carbon accounting and to set out your agenda, if you like, in the business. So you'll see the clouds at the top there, the gases that are considered when we're doing carbon accounting, which we talked about a bit earlier. And you'll see these arrows here, scope 1, 2, and 3. So let me just give you a brief overview of what those are, why they are split out into different scopes. So scope 1 is to do with fuel that is burnt in your business. So if you have a gas boiler on site, if you combust materials as part of your manufacturing process, perhaps, any vehicles, any company vehicles, I should say, company-owned vehicles that you run, and the fuel that is burnt in those vehicles going about their business. That is what we mean when we talk about scope 1 emissions, and they can be relatively easily measured because we can gather your gas bills, we can gather your fuel card information and measure that. So it's an easier place to start as a business if you haven't looked at that already. Scope 2 is slightly different. The reason it's separated out is it's energy that you consume in your business, but it's not, if you like, produced within your operations. So electricity is the most common example of that, because with electricity, it comes from the grid. You're not making electricity, and it's then transmitted into your business for your use. So that's why it's separated out, because it's not happening within your operational boundary in terms of the production of that particular power source. And again, easily measured. You can gather your electricity bills for the year, work out what kilowatt hours you are using, and use conversion factors to get to a ton CO2 equivalent calculation. A lot of businesses have done this. It may be something you're looking at or have completed already. It's a great place to start, and it's kind of the step into doing a full operational review. When you get further into carbon accounting and the greenhouse gas protocol, you get into what's called scope 3 emissions. And there are 15 categories within scope 3, which I won't run through all today. You'll be delighted to hear. But important ones to call out, the emissions scope 3 are split into upstream and downstream activities. So upstream, if you think of the goods you buy in or raw materials you might buy in to do what you do as a business, and that could be anything from paper for the office to steel if you manufacture something. So it's these goods coming into the business that fall into the upstream category. So you'll see their purchase goods and services in that dark blue arrow moving from the left. Any capital goods, so any investment that you've made to the business, that's measured as well. And you get into one of the biggest categories, which is often transportation and distribution. So that is getting these goods, these materials into your business so you can do what you do. And also within upstream, you're looking at things like your employee activity. So, how do they get into work? What does that look like in terms of a ton CO2 calculation? And also your business travel and any waste from operations. So water waste or material waste, packaging waste, that kind of stuff. So scope 3 is getting more complex, and this is often where companies kind of get a bit of paralysis and they think, right, how do I approach that? So hopefully I can explain a bit more how you do that today. And then on the far right hand side, the downstream activities, you're looking at onward transit of goods. So your finished product, if you're a manufacturer, where that's going from, where you're delivering it to. And some of those latter ones probably not relevant for a lot of businesses. So unless you're McDonald's and you run franchises, you probably wouldn't be thinking about that. Investments is often not part of the calculation, but they are all considered. So when you look at scope 3 categories, you pick out all that are relevant to your business when you start doing your scoping activity to work out how to measure your CO2. Next slide, please. Scope 3 emissions for the vast majority of businesses are the big challenge. So if you take a supermarket as an example, their scope 1 and 2 emissions, they've probably measured and done a lot of work in that already. They might have solar on the roofs to reduce their energy bills. They might be running efficient energy management systems. But the real challenge, over 90% of their emissions will come from scope 3. So that's their supply chain. The goods that they're buying in to stock their shelves, that's a real key area for them to examine. So scope 3 is vitally important. And I think the point is that a lot of manufacturers will, sorry, not a lot of manufacturers, a lot of businesses will start and are starting to look at their supply chain in terms of asking them about their carbon emissions. So I don't know, if you made motor cars, for example, you buy in various parts from a supply chain, and the motor manufacturer may well be starting to ask those suppliers, what's your carbon strategy? What are you starting to do because you're in my scope 3 emissions? Next slide, please. So obviously lots of opportunities and challenges within carbon management. I just spoke about consumer client demand. They want to know what you're doing in terms of your carbon reporting. There are legal requirements for larger businesses, not really for the sort of medium small SME, but if you're kind of turning over 30 million plus, you need to start thinking about some of the legislation that is out there, and it needs to be considered. So one example there for tender returns, it says PPN 0621. That's a government policy note that has been issued to all government bodies, and their procurement departments require that for contracts over a certain value, that the supplier submits a carbon reduction plan as part of their tender submission. And if they don't provide that, and you're supplying into any government departments, then you won't get past go. So it's important to start having these thoughts about where your business fits in that respect. Is it your customers that are demanding you start looking at carbon reduction? Is it perhaps a government legislation piece? So there's often challenges associated, clearly. So you might not have someone in your business who's a carbon or sustainability expert. It may be someone who takes it on because they're enthusiastic and they want to do something in that area. They're environmentally minded. But you might not have the expertise, and you might not know exactly the data that you need to get. And a lot of businesses think it's a big challenge. It's the eating elephant sort of analogy, one chunk at a time. And one of the big elements which needs to be considered is fear of greenwashing. You may be familiar with the term, but it's businesses making unsubstantiated environmental claims, and that's why the accounting side of things is so important. So that you can substantiate and prove that you've done the work to back up the claims you make publicly about your goods or services. Next slide, please. Right. Yeah, so this is about, you might have a headache by now. I hope you haven't. Hopefully you're not feeling like picture 2 and you're flat on the couch thinking, what do I do? But really, what we are looking to do here is, yes, it's a hard problem. There's a lot of detail in here to get into a full carbon accounting program. But the idea behind the standards that we work to, we're just about to come on to, is that we break it down into a much easier task. And, we break it down again and again. So we have lots of activity streams that we are doing, which individually are achievable, doable. We can see the answer, and they all feed into the bigger project to map your operational carbon. Next slide, please. So how do you approach it? So this is a standard laid out currently in a PAS standard, which is a BSI issued standard called PAS 2060, and it's just been launched as an ISO standard, which sits within the 14,000 family for environmental ISOs. So ISOs are international standards. They apply globally, and it breaks down how you approach carbon accounting. So your first step is to measure. That's what you might know as a carbon footprint report. And what I've described earlier is kind of how you go about starting that activity with those scopes 1, 2, and 3. Once you've measured your carbon footprint, you can then identify the emission areas where there's opportunity for improvement. So you will see where there are categories you can work on to reduce your carbon output. And from that, you set targets. So you will look at your science-based target strategy, your journey to net zero, how you're going to do there, break it down by years and say, right, that's my action for year 1. Next year, I'm putting solar on the roof. The year after that, I'm going to look at my vehicle fleet and see if there's a way of moving to hybrid or perhaps electric vehicles. So you start setting targets of how you start working towards net zero. And then you have a reduction plan on the back of that, which articulates those targets with business cases. And if you really are enthusiastic and it makes sense to you to get an ISO accreditation, you can do step 4, which is a third-party verification of your achievements. So it's a 4-step process, and that's what we major on. Next slide, please. And that 4-step process, you've probably heard about the roadmap to net zero. You've probably heard about the government target of achieving net zero by 2050. And by using this structure, this 4-stage process annually, then that is your way of working out a plan to get your business to a net zero position. So each year you measure, so year one, you've set your baseline target, you set your baseline carbon footprint, you know what your ton CO2 calculation is, you set your targets to reduce, and in year two, you kind of look at that year gone past, the past 12 months, you see what targets you set for reduction, you see how you performed against those targets, so you measure again, and then you repeat the process. It's rinse and repeat, and you carry on with that target setting and reduction strategy right through to your net zero goal, which may be 2040 or 2050. Next, please. Just a quick word about carbon accounting. There are a lot of grades. What I'm talking about here kicks in at high quality carbon accounting, or to an ISO standard and to the Greenhouse Gas Protocol. The main difference is if you start at 1, you're really looking then at probably putting some, I don't know, electricity usage data into a free or cheap online calculator. You've no understanding of what the algorithms are within that calculator and how accurate the output would be. If you work up through the grades, grade 4, a lot of companies are at this sort of stage. They've looked at their scope 1, 2 and emissions, and they've calculated those to a good level of clarity, and they're perhaps now considering their scope 3 strategy. And high quality level 6 is where you start doing it to the ISO standard, and you start measuring using that guidance. So yeah, consider where you want to be, how important it is to be accurate, and how important it might be looking forward to getting your work verified. And next, please. This is the typical carbon footprint work stream, which typically would happen over a 6 to 12 month period. So the biggest area for you guys is data collection. That's often the hardest piece of the work once you've got an understanding of the standard, obviously. But you've got a lot of suppliers out there. You've got a lot of different data areas, those 15 subcategories to look at in terms of scope 3 emissions. So this is often the hard work bit. The rest comes and follows. There's process, there's government issued factors that we use to do the analysis. So yeah, think about how much capacity you've got for someone to kind of be focused on this project, because that's often the key. I hate to see businesses start off and then they just haven't got the internal resource or to carry through and do a really good piece of work collecting the data. So think about that. Next slide, please. Just a few examples. So this is often the starting point for businesses. This is kind of a discovery activity that sets your blueprint for carbon activity, carbon footprinting. So what we do is we run a carbon workshop with key stakeholders. It's a day workshop. We map out the business graphically, so you can see what the organization looks like and where the carbon emissions are. And then we put it down in an emission source report, which summarizes your scope 1, 2, 3 emissions. And it also tells you where you can find the information to fulfill those categories and get the data you need to start doing a carbon footprint calculation. Next, please. This is a typical carbon footprint report. You get a nice summary page. A lot of our customers like to get that second page and blow it up and put it in their factories or on their office wall. And then you get a detailed carbon footprint report that looks at all the strategies. So this is your baseline document, where if it's your first year of doing this, and it's repeated each year as you recalculate your carbon footprint. Next, please. And this is a typical target setting activity. So these are science-based targets. where you've looked at the activity that you have planned over the coming years as your carbon reduction activity, and you plot it each year to see how you're performing against your target goals. So this is your high level reporting that you might put into your into your management team. Next, please. And this is a typical carbon reduction plan. So the example here is for a fleet, and it gives at a very high level a analysis of how much carbon can be saved by, in this case, moving the fleet to potentially a half hybrid fleet, an all hybrid fleet, or an all electric fleet. It shows you how much CO2 you will save by doing that. And it will be accompanied with a business case at a very high level that says, you know, what the kind of costs are that are involved as well. So this is where you look at the different categories. This is kind of your blueprint for analysing the different categories and sort of empowering you to implement your carbon reduction strategy. Next, please. Okay, so the good news is you don't have to import expensive consultants to do this. I'd argue that we're not expensive, but yeah, you know what I mean. This BSI standard I referred to earlier, 14068. It's available to purchase. This is from the BSI website. It's £150 for a digital copy, and it lays out the strategy that you need to start implementing to achieve this. If you can click one more, the only challenge you will have is that, you know, there's a lot of work. Don't use post-its. That's not very carbon friendly, is it? But yeah, there is a lot of work. You need to make sure that if you are embarking on this project yourself, that the team member that is responsible for it has capacity to do the job. So you might want to consider employing people like me. Next slide, please. Oh, that's a bit about us. I'm not going to labour on that, but we're celebrating our 30th year this year. We started life in the energy and telecoms market. In 2013, we started to do energy saving audits as issued by the government. And 2017, we started doing carbon solutions. So we've got 80 carbon auditors out there. So if you've got any regionally, we cover across the UK. And I think that is me done, maybe a couple of minutes over. Apologies.
Very good stuff. Thank you for that. I found that really interesting. So I hope everyone on the call did as well. Thank you, David, for that presentation. And I particularly like anybody that starts a presentation with the definition of carbon neutral and net zero in terms of the split, because we're all guilty of merging the two together. So so good stuff. So I'm hoping there's some questions we've got for David. In an ideal world, I'd like to hear from a business who's looking for some help in starting, but we'll have a look in the chat first of all and see what's come in. Let's have a quick look. Question from Justine from the Growth Hub, which my colleague Claire has already answered, but I'll perhaps expand on it a little bit more. Justine has asked if our decarbonisation net zero grant can be used for consultancy fees. It can't, Justine, as Claire has clarified. However, what I will expand on that for is bear in mind that things that David would pull out on his report in terms of improvement measures, we possibly can give you some grant funding towards. So it's a no, but with expansion on the actual funding side of that, if that helps. Okay. And
the only thing, if you don't mind me adding to that, Jonathan, as well, a lot of the reduction actions will also result in lower energy costs for the business. So whilst it's not a direct feed into paying for the project, you know, it's you can take the money from elsewhere and kind of reallocate it, I guess.
Yeah. Good answer, thank you. Got a really good question here from Mark Thomas. Thanks for your question, Mark. I'll read it for you, David. We are in a managed building, so not responsible for energy bills. Any advice on reporting for scope 1 and 2? That must be quite a common question, I would have thought. Am I right?
Yes, it is. And unfortunately, you know, you can't really apply this process to that, because as you say, you're not responsible for the bills. The only influence you can have is by engaging with your landlord and seeing if we can get them engaged on looking at low energy tariffs maybe looking at some form of renewable energy, whether it be solar, something along those lines, but doing something directly yourself as a business within your own operational scope, sadly, no, there's not a lot you can do if you're in managed buildings.
Yeah, you've got to hope that your landlord is a decent landlord, I would have thought, as a starter, I would imagine. Yeah.
I mean, in terms of measurement, we do work with a lot of businesses who maybe have their own premises and then they have other premises where they're managed, say a professional services firm, a lawyer's firm, they might own one office and have managed in the others. So we can, on an understanding of the size of the building and how much of it you occupy, we can make educated assumptions to do the measurement side of things. Yeah. But sadly, the carbon reduction side is not so easy.
Okay, good stuff. Hope that answers your question, Mark. Got some more questions dropped in now, which is great. Next one from David. I'll read it for you if that's okay. You've indicated measurements, but are there many different areas? So how do you actually measure? I'm not quite. Can you read that one in the chat at all, David, to see what?
Yeah, let me just. Means? Sorry. Let me just get the chat up. Sorry.
Just to perhaps get the context a bit better if you read it. David, do you know what I mean?
David Roddice, yes, indicated measurement.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
There are many different areas. So how do you actually measure? Okay. Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned, the easy wins are gas, fuel, electricity. Let's take employee commuting. How do we measure that? Well, we send out a survey to the employees, which helps us understand how they get into work. Do they car share? Do they walk? Do they get a bike, train? And once we got that feedback from the employees, we have government factors that we apply to their transport method to calculate the carbon footprint. So that's one example. With suppliers, we collect invoice details, we collect weights of any deliveries, and we also send the suppliers a survey to gather that information and make the appropriate calculations. So yeah, it's lots of different ways of doing things. I hope that's what you're referring to, David. If it's not,
I think that's a good answer. Thank you. Next question from Katrina. Katrina, thanks for your question. I'll read it out for the rest of the audience, David, if that's okay. But if you perhaps want to look in the chat as well. I started Scope 3 calculations with tons of CO2e for staff working from home, commuting and business travel. This alone was a big piece of work. It will be helpful to understand where I should best next focus my efforts. Is there a way to identify most likely emission areas to prioritize based on the type of activities or services we deliver? Good question.
Great question, and great that you've got as far as you have, Katrina. That's really good to hear. So it's what does your business do? Before we start any activity with a business, we issue a scoping document to get a really good insight as to what you do as a business. So I'll give you an example. I have a client and they make chiller cabinets for supermarkets, and the highest element of their carbon footprint, and the bit that we're really focusing on reducing at the moment, is transport of raw materials into their business and then the onward transit of the completed cabinet to the supermarket. That's huge. So if you're in manufacturing, it's likely that your transport, upstream, downstream transport, is going to be a really, really key area of focus and a large part of your carbon footprint. But I'd say, Katrina, drop me a note. Just tell me what your business does, and I can probably point you in the right direction for your next steps.
Yeah, good answer. Thank you. I think with that in mind, actually, if anyone wants to sort of follow up on anything, then just use the chat, and David can use the next part of the session just to answer some questions and perhaps give you his details if you want to engage with him after the session as well. So use the chat, Katrina, if that would help you moving forward for that one. I'm going to ask just one or two more questions because I'm conscious that we need to get onto our next speaker. So Annette, I'll come to you next. Thank you for your question. Similar to the previous question we had about managed buildings, on managed buildings, we are with University of Warwick and they have their own net zero policy. Would we then be included in this for Scope 1 and Scope 2? That's a good question, actually. What do you think on that one, David?
Yeah, universities generally are pretty advanced in their net zero strategies.
Yeah, good point.
Just because there's so many interested parties within there, and the degrees moving to environmental, etc. So I would say probably without a doubt, it will be in there. They will be measuring the energy from their buildings, full stop. So yeah, you could contract the university and see what their take is. I guess it depends on whether you're occupying one building or whether you're one of many organizations in that building. But yes, I'd definitely contact them and ask them whether they've done the measurement for their own estate and how they could distill that down to your business.
Okay, good answer. Thank you. I'm going to just jump to the final question for now, which I'll run through quickly. But David, if you wouldn't mind, there are a few more questions we've had in, and it's good to see so much engagement. Would you mind during the next sort of 20 minutes just perhaps responding to the ones I've missed? So I'm going to ask Michael Stevens this question now, and then the ones below that, if you could perhaps jump on, if you wouldn't mind, alongside any of my team, Claire and Alex, if you're on, perhaps you can sort of mop up the ones we've not got to. So Michael's question is, are there any training courses you would recommend to become better informed and qualified to carry out audits internally?
Well, I'm going to say
in other words, yeah, of course, yeah.
I'm going to have to say,
yourself, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going to just plug myself just briefly on that.
No problem.
We do run workshops. So if you've got a team and you want to do this job yourself, you can hire us in for a day, and we'll workshop it with you, and that's it, and then hand over the baby to you guys to crack on. So you don't have to engage us for a full 6-month program. You can just give us a buzz and we'll come and do a workshop for you.
Other training courses are available in my BBC style comment there.
Absolutely.
Good answer, lovely. Okay, right. Well, we're going to move on now. So again, thank you for your presentation. And just on that, those slides are going to be shared following the event. There's a lot of good information in there as well. So if that is of use, please contact David after the session. So just moving on to our next and final speaker, just to sort of try and tie things together a bit more. We've now got some live case study examples of businesses that have already gone through this process. So I'd like to introduce our next speaker, Tammy Jacobs from ProEnviro. Over to you, Tammy.
Thank you very much, and good hello to everyone. Yes, as previously mentioned, I'm Tamron Jacobs. Everyone calls me Tammy. I work for ProEnviro, and ProEnviro is a specialist energy engineering and process optimization consultancies with over 30 years of experience working with manufacturing and other businesses. We are currently delivering the energy efficiency reviews in the West Midlands. So these are case studies that have gone through before this, but we are currently one of the delivery partners for the West Midlands decarbonisation programme. So I'm one of the project managers at ProEnviro, and again, the specialist engineering optimisation and carbon emissions reduction consultancy. I have been involved in delivering innovative solutions in decarbonising the energy intensive sector. I personally don't have the 30 years of experience, but the company does. And being part of the team, I've had the wonderful privilege of sitting on the IDRIC, which is the Industrial Decarbonisation Research and Innovation Centre's roundtable discussions. And this was to standardise Scope 3 emissions. Part of what I do my day-to-day basis is to create sustainable decarbonisation plans for a multitude of organisations. And then to date, I have currently submitted 12 applications to the SBTI, which is your Science-Based Targets Initiatives. 9 of those companies have successfully achieved their SBTI accreditation, and 3 are awaiting the review process. So that's just a little bit of background of myself and why I say that I'm an expert in what I do. The first case study that we'll be discussing is one of the clients that we work with is a company called Datagraphic, and this is the successful implementation of their net zero carbon strategy and the sustainable solution projects. If you go to the next slide for me, please. So in essence, Datagraphic are a print and digital media document processors, and they've been in operation for over 3 decades. Their experience is public and private sector, and they do digital transformation of manual and repetitive document processing. And most of theirs is automated technology. They've got a secure platform that they need to use because they do a lot of digital printing for banks and NHS, and most likely the printing from your energy bills is most likely done through them as well. So They turn physical inbound paper files into digital information assets for their clients, as well as providing a digital printed service. So this is their roadmap of sustainability to up until end of 2023. Obviously, their net zero target is 2050. And we've been working with them for several years. So if you please go to the next slide. Their old system. So we started working with them in 2019, and we've helped them implement the greener way of operating. This has been achieved through the implementation of a wide range of different activities. We started their carbon footprinting journey by tracking their scope 1 and 2 emissions using a carbon accounting tool. We have our own carbon accounting tool that we've designed and developed in-house, which uses the GHG protocol's carbon emission factors. And then obviously everything that we do is centered around being science-based. So we actually physically go in and measure carbon emissions. We micrometer items of plant. We then get that information that on a half-hourly basis, you use that information, and we then calculate the tons of CO2e each year. So this is their scope 1 and 2. And as you can see in 2019, their totals for scope 1 and 2 was 280 tons. And as you can see, up until 2022, which is the data that we had, because obviously we've just done the 2023, there has been a decrease in the carbon emissions. Interestingly enough, there has been an increase in their production, but they have made an absolute carbon emission reduction. So next slide, please. Okay, so in delivering the net zero renewable energy projects, we've helped them reduce their reliance on their gas usage. So as you can see here, the reliance of their usage of natural gas for scope 1 and scope 3, because what we do is we measure scope 1 and 3 for all. We measure scope 3 for all 1 and 2 activities as well, because there are scope 3 elements for scope 1 and 2 activities. So through process optimization and the consultancy projects that we've done, we have made various improvements to their operation, one of them being how they use their natural gas throughout their facilities. We assessed and then assisted in the successful application for the Economic Growth Solutions grant funding to facilitate an implementation of net zero strategies. And these are achieved through a series of temperature and heating monitoring exercises where we have significantly reduced the amount of gas that they use on site. This reduction is a reduction of 64.8 tons of CO2e, which is a 61% improvement compared to 2019. So, and then again, as a result of significant investment on behalf of Datagraphic in their process optimization and their introduction of renewable technologies, they have significantly reduced their CO2 impact per unit of production as well. So as you can see, compared to 2019, 2022, this is a normalized pattern. So this is a pattern based on their production numbers. And as you can see, the rate of carbon per item printed has gone down significantly. And this impact is due to the current installation of their solar at their headquarters in Rugby. And they have additional planned installations of solar at their Chesterfield site, which will allow them to generate more electricity than they currently need, putting Datagraphic in a carbon deficit, thereby enabling them to make the claims that they are carbon neutral at scope 1 and 2. They also apply to climate care, which you can go to the next slide, it's fine. They do also apply to climate care. However, they have significantly reduced the percentage of which they offset because they have received their SBTi accreditation and verification. And as part of the SBTi targets, you cannot offset more than 5% of your carbon emissions. They offset more than that because they want to, because they are a very proactive company and they want to deforest areas. So they do pay that, but they don't count it in terms of their carbon credits. They don't use carbon credits because they've reduced their carbon emissions significantly enough that they have received their SBTi accreditation and verification. And this had taken place in April. So they have received it. They've been science-based targets verified since April. So we're quite happy and we've assisted in that. And then as their head of sustainability has said, The gentleman's name is Peter Wells, and he said that they couldn't have done it without our help. I actually helped the submission of the documentation as well, including the net zero carbon plan, and we are currently working on their carbon reduction plan, their CRP, because they are in the government sector, so they are applying for tenders and things, so they need to have a CRP in place. The next company that we're looking at is Elite Plastics. They are achieving their net zero through sustainable manufacturing. They are also an SME. Go to the next slide. They are a leading plastic manufacturing company, they recognize the urgency of reducing their carbon emissions and their environmental impact several years ago. And to address this challenge, they've partnered with us to embark on a long-term low carbon process optimization strategy, focusing on technology and behavioral changes. And then this is the case study that examines Elite Plastics' journey towards emissions and energy monitoring and management initiatives with a significant CO2 savings that has been achieved. So this is their this is the delivering their net zero projects. So as you can see, this is scope 1, 2, and 3 that are currently calculated on here. The scope 3 emission baseline for them is only 2023. So as you can see, there is a drop in 2022 and then an increase in 23. That's because we've started calculating and adding more scope 3 emissions to their carbon calculations. So thanks to these efforts and initiatives that Elite Plastic have done, they've achieved an impressive CO2 savings that's estimated to exceed 500 tonnes. These accomplishments have been highlighted in the company's proactive approach to sustainability and reasonable energy management and the commitment to reducing its environmental impact. They have subsequently since won the sustainable, they have won a sustainability award. And once I've received the details of the award that they have won, I'll happily share it. And a lot of this is due to programs like the program that is currently being run. Go to the next slide. And then they have also they're working on their next phase of sustainability and their plans by reaching out to their suppliers and their partners that they work with into reporting their carbon emissions. They're assisting their supply chain in training them how to capture their carbon emissions, how to calculate them. They are supporting their supply line. They are talking to their suppliers and engaging with them to understand where their scope 3 emissions are coming from and how they can positively impact their value chain. And this will help the organisation reach its net zero target, including its scope 3 emissions by 2035. We assisted with the application process by collecting, collating and analysing its data. I'm sorry. And then they're one of the companies that we are waiting for their verification. They've submitted their SBTI application at the beginning of the month. So we're waiting for their net zero targets to be verified. And once that has been achieved, I'm very sure that they will let everybody within the program know that they have achieved their SBTI accreditation. So if you go to the next slide for me, please. And lastly, the last case study that we've got is company Servo Steel. So this is they're achieving their net zero and their sustainable manufacturing. Servo Steel is the UK's largest independent steel roll processor that provide tons and tons and tons of pre-rolled steel to the Black Country. Their current processing facilities include one of the only decoiling and pickling lines within the UK, and they had an annual energy consumption of 1.8 million kilowatt hours of electricity and 3.6 million kilowatt hours of gas. I do apologize. Yeah, and that was used for steam generation, and the total energy cost of theirs was over £280,000 per annum for each of those. So the company operates continuous operation, okay, 24 hours a day, 5 days a week, and they have recently experienced significant increase in the energy costs and the pressure to maximize their demand. So they've approached us and asked for some help in order to reduce their energy consumption and optimize their process so that they can reduce that reliance on the grid. So it is important that any energy improvement projects or processes be accurately monitored or for extended periods to ensure that the impact of the investment or the improvement can be evaluated effectively. So if you go to the next slide for me. So this is the current footprint of Servo Steel. The energy audit for Servo Steel, this is for scope 1 and 2. And as you can see at the bottom, they've got a full scope 1, 2, and 3 emissions. So we've covered all their scope 1, 2, and 3. So they've calculated their scope 1, 2. We've calculated their scope 3. We've gone historically back to include their scope 3 emissions as far as back as 2019. So this covers all their carbon emissions that they currently have, that we have government conversion factors for. So that includes their employee commuting, it includes their upstream and downstream transportation distribution, their waste, their water, it includes their purchase goods and services, it includes everything that is currently able to be calculated in terms of GHG conversion factors has been calculated and accounted for. And this goes back from 2019 all the way up to December 2023. So if you go to the next slide, please. Okay, so the data collections, that is a list of all the data that has been collected at scope 1 and 2, as well as scope 3. And then the emission reduction plan is they have enlisted the assistance of us in order to help them reduce their carbon emissions. And then, as you can see, that by the carbon emissions, they're showing an increase in absolute carbon emissions, but that's because they have had an increase in production. If you look at their normalized values, which is the table on the right-hand side, you will see that they have a reduction in normalized carbon emissions. And we've started including the out-of-scope emissions as well, and that is just because those are scope 3 emissions that are not accounted for anywhere else within the scope 1, 2, or 3. So we've accounted for those. There are only emission factors for that going from 2021. So you will notice that from 2021, there is an additional bar on the bar chart, and that's because those are out-of-scope emissions and they only started in 2021. So we calculate all the emissions, including the outer scopes. So if you go to the next slide for me. So their emission reduction targets. So these are targets that are based on Servo Steel has had one of the energy efficiency reviews, and they are an energy intensive company, and they have received their report, and based on the recommendations within the report, these are the estimated carbon savings that by implementing the recommendations, these are the estimated carbon savings that they will then make. They have been able to reduce their net zero target from 2040 to 2035 by having the energy efficiency review, calculating the carbon emissions. They are then able to reduce that from 2040 to 2035. And then if you go to the next slide, and they have now working on the next phase of their sustainability plans. They are reaching out to their suppliers as well. They are capturing the information that are provided by the suppliers, and then enabling them to understand their scopes, their value chain better. And it will help the organization reach their net zero target by 2035, as I said, which was 2040, but it has now been reduced to 2035. And then again, where I assisted in the application process by collecting, and analyzing this data, and then actually submitting the documentation for them as well. I'm also working on their CRP as well, because again, they work in that sector and they need their CRP. This.
Lovely. Is that your last slide, Tammy? I think it
was.
That is
fantastic. My last slide.
No,
yes,
good stuff. Thank you ever so much for sharing that with us. It was really informative, and I think it was
Thank
what
you.
I liked about that was you showed some different sectors, which is obviously important as well. Different types of business. So many thanks for that. And also as a pointer, if anybody interested on the first case study that Tammy used, which was data graphics, we know of them well within our program, and we actually had them on one of our podcasts recently as well. So if you're interested in what they've done, there's a link I'll share with you shortly to our Green Business podcasts, and you can listen to more of my dulcet tones talking to Pete at Data Graphic about their journey as well. So good stuff. And just to confirm to everyone on the call again, all the slides are shared, so you can take that away and digest it at your leisure moving forward. And I think from both speakers, it shows the benefits if your business is in that position of engaging with a good consultancy who can guide you through your journey for the next 10, 15, 20 years moving forward. So fantastic. Okay, so let's jump to some questions, Tammy, if that's okay.
Fantastic.
I have a question just dropped in from Umar. Thanks for your question. I'll read it to you, Tammy. Tammy, can I ask how these companies have approached you? Were they sent literature, or was it just through your website? So effectively, how are you running your marketing and your advertising? Maybe how do people know of ProEnviro? Basically, I think is what she's asking.
No, not a problem at all. Currently, we are actually like the world's best kept secret, because we are running we are the delivery partners and working with a lot of the councils to deliver their net zero carbon programs. We are not advertising at the moment because, I mean, we've got a lot of companies that we're working with in terms of the program itself. So we are, as I say, we're one of the delivery partners. We're subcontracted through several organizations within the project itself, and we're covering quite a large sector. So a lot of companies are companies that we've worked with for years. We have gotten quite a few new ones we do attend events like there's one in Sandwell coming up. We attend those kind of events. We've attended several others in the past, and we don't feel the need to advertise in terms of putting a massive billboard up somewhere, because word of mouth travels faster than any billboard will ever get.
Yeah, and I suppose a billboard might have an inbuilt carbon on it as well, maybe. So you want to try. Word of mouth is carbon neutral, maybe you could argue.
Word of mouth is carbon neutral, yes.
Good answer, thank you. And also, David, just to thank you to answering the questions in the chat earlier on. I do appreciate that. So I hope everyone's had a good answer back from David in response to their questions. Have we got any more questions for Tammy though, from anybody, before I start to wrap things up? Because we are approaching my little bit and then the end of the session. Has anyone got anything they'd like to either raise their hand maybe, or drop a quick question into the chat? If not, we can move on. No, Pamela, thanks for your feedback. Yeah, we like these case studies. It shows how things are done and done well. So thanks for your comment. Okay, I'll wrap up that part of the webinar now, and I'll quickly move on to my bit. So thanks again to our two guest speakers. It was really appreciated. Let me just sort of bookend things now by talking a bit about us and what we do. So Decarbonisation Net Zero is a relatively new program, and we're here to provide advice and support, things like today's webinar and so on, to help businesses in our region become less carbon heavy, basically. And we also have access to grant funding as well to help those changes be initiated. And just for context, it's part of the wider West Midlands business support activity, which is funded through, you may have heard this acronym, UKSPF, which is the UK Shared Prosperity Fund. So we have a lot of grant funding available. It does vary slightly by region. So without going too much in detail on that now, off the bat, though, as a business, you have to be an SME business and you have to pass eligibility checks, which we do when you inquire. But you can access between £1,000 and £100,000 worth of grant funding based on up to 50% intervention. So effectively, we will put up to half towards your capital project, be it, for example, lighting, solar, insulation, boilers, heating, all those kind of things as you would expect. Just critical to say at this juncture, though, that Warwickshire's bit of funding does not offer support for renewable energy, as in solar PV at the moment, but the funding pot for Coventry and the wider combined authority does. However, a couple of howevers on that. First of all, if you're in Warwickshire and interested in solar, please reach out anyway, because I like to help anyway and explain to you a bit more about the benefits of solar. I always use the phrase grant or no grant, it's worth doing. So engage if you want to in Warwickshire, but especially if you're in the combined authority area, get in touch. It covers things like solar. And also, as something to add as a win back for our Warwickshire businesses, if you're in Warwickshire, even though you won't get solar funding, you can benefit from 12 months of free access to a carbon accounting tool called Zeller. You perhaps want to close your ears, David, at all to tell on that one, but there's free access available to Zeller, which is a good carbon accounting tool that helps you start on your journey. And Warwickshire County Council rather have won some funding for that. So if that helps, register and we can point you in the right direction for that. Next slide, please, Maria. Okay, so just again, looking at our objectives, we are here to help you. We are here to help local businesses decarbonise and improve the natural environment. That's what we're all here for, and we're all very, very, very keen on that. We're also here to help align the SME sector with the UK's legally binding climate target to reduce carbon to net zero by 2050. But most pertinently, we're here to provide immediate support to businesses. So if you're out there and you're struggling, you're not sure where to turn, we can give you some initial guidance on that. We can try and increase your competitiveness, because as I always say, if you're not doing this, I guarantee your competitors are, and we're here to try and guide you on bits about sustainability like this webinar today. Next slide, please, Maria. Okay, so just talking you through then how to engage with us and how our process works. First thing you need to do, wherever you are, whether you're in the Combined Authority area or Warwickshire, is register with us, and I'll share the slide with you with the QR code and some links shortly. So you'll register first of all, and that asks for some general eligibility questions, as you would expect. It comes through to our team, of which I work within. We will then give you a call, and we're just asking some general sort of triage questions to sort of make sure that we can help. And if we can't, we'll point you to somewhere who can. If we can help, though, we'll discuss what you're looking to do, and then we'll book in our free on-site energy audit. And just to confirm, that is us on site looking around your premises and carrying out a free audit. So we'll work with you, we'll look at your bills to see how much energy you're using, we'll go around your site and look for those things that I've mentioned, your heating, your lighting, your processes, all those kind of things. And then we will then give you a free energy report that shows you what things are costing you and where you can make improvements, and it will pull out those real tangible things you need as a business. How much will this cost me and how much will it save me? So you can start to prioritize 1, 2, or maybe 3 or even 4 things in terms of your improvement journey, basically. So that again, that's all free. And the good bit, of course, is the things that we work with and identify for you, you can then apply for a grant of up to 50% towards the things we identify. So it's very much a win-win-win. And again, it is all free. And the grant is not a loan. It is actually a grant to cover up to 50% of your chosen recommendations. Next slide, please, Maria. Okay, so a couple of other resources from us, which again are all free. So we have what we call the Green Business Network, which is as it says, it's a network where we have over, nearly 3,000 members, and you can join that for free. You get network opportunities, you get a newsletter, and you will be the first to know about new things in the pipeline, other grant funding, events, webinars, and so on and so forth. So if that's of interest, QR code is there. Please feel free to join. Next slide, please, Maria. Okay, just mentioned this earlier on. We do a podcast about every month now, and as you would expect, it focuses on other bits of sustainability. We've had all sorts of wonderful sort of topics over the last year or so, one of which was data graphics, who I mentioned earlier on. So if that is of interest, scan that QR code and listen to our previous episodes. In fact, there's a screen grab of the one that I'm referring to, where we had Peter Wells on from data graphics. So have a listen. It is of interest, and it sort of guides you more on tips and pointers and in your net zero journey. Next slide, please, Maria. Okay, now this is quite important actually. Our Green Business Directory is where we have a list of installers and suppliers who can help with your net zero journey in terms of installing things like lighting and heating and so on. Now we get asked this a lot as a council. where when we do a report for a business and we flag various things, 9 times out of 10, the business will ask me who they should engage with to get the work done. Now, as a council, we have to stay impartial, so we can't recommend Joe Bloggs Lighting for argument's sake, but what we can do is point you at the directory where there is a list of people who have done work before in our area and we know of. So if that is of help, please follow that link. And again, if you're on the call and you're an installer or a supplier and you want to go on the directory, reach out to us and we can add you moving forward as well. Next slide, please, Maria. Okay, just starting to wrap things up now. So just to bring you into the loop on our upcoming events, we have 4 events coming up, as you can see. We've got one tomorrow. Anybody that's in the Coventry area, we have the Midlands Business Expo. That's a really well attended event at the CBS Arena. And then we have another event on the 13th of March at the Village Hotel, again in Coventry. There is an FSB event on March the 18th at Coombe Abbey that unfortunately is fully booked. And then there is also a well-attended event called Venture Fest in Birmingham that's really covers a lot about innovation and cutting edge carbon reduction and so on. But I've been myself. It's very interesting and also has the best catering I've actually experienced anywhere so far at any of these events. So those that are of interest, the links are there. Please pop along and we'll look forward to seeing you then. And then we have another webinar lined up on March the 13th entitled Net Zero Grant Success Stories, where we'll be talking again about businesses who have done this and done it right. So if that is of interest, we'd love to see you there again moving forward. Okay, next slide, please, Maria. Okay. Right, this is the bit where you need to register. So if what we've talked about today is of interest, or you want to discuss things more in more detail, the best bits there really are the registration links. So if you're in the West Midlands Combined Authority, there's your link to register moving forward. And if you're from Warwickshire, there's the separate link to register for the programme. Both links come through to us, but it's under different funding streams. So don't worry, you'll speak to one of us on that triage call initially. But yeah, click away and we'll look forward to seeing you at some point soon on site, hopefully. Next slide, please, Maria. Okay, so that's it for today. We're just slightly over, so I'll wrap things up. Firstly, as I always do, can I thank our speakers for giving up their time today and for engaging in the discussion. It's been much appreciated, and I hope you found it of interest yourselves. Thanks to Maria, as always, for setting up these events. I know you put a lot of hard work in, so thank you from me. And then finally, thanks to everyone for attending today. We've had a really good attendance today and some really good questions. So I do hope it's been useful. So again, if you are of interest, please reach out and hopefully you'll see one of us on site soon. Thanks very much.